Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys all for coming here today. We're very excited to have Coach Muffet McGraw join us today. It's a very big deal in women in business and to me. So super excited about it. So just before we get started, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you have a question, throw it in the chat, come off mute, raise your hand, whatever you're comfortable with. Coach McGraw has been kind enough to say that she would also really like to answer all of the questions. So make sure they keep them coming. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Coach Muffet McGraw. She is originally from Westchester, Pennsylvania, and she's been the head coach at Notre Dame for the Notre Dame women's basketball team for 33 seasons and just retired this past year and has joined the Mendoza business community to teach us all about leadership. Over her 33 seasons, she had an 848 and 252 season or career record at Notre Dame. And during that time, she made 7 trips to the national championship game, which resulted in 2 national championships. Pretty cool. Since then, she's also been a 2017 inductee of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame, in addition to the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame and the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. One of my favorite stats while I was researching all the good stuff is that she also had a perfect 100% NCAA graduation success score from 2004 to 2014, which is a very big deal in the NCAA. So very excited to turn it over to Coach Muffet McGraw.
Well, thanks. I'm excited to be here. And as you said, I want to answer anybody's questions. I also wanted to thank you for what you did for the meals and the food bank and all the people that participated and gave us your support. That was amazing. Across the country, we raised 150,000 pounds of food, $90,000. So it was a really great effort by the alumni clubs around the country. But I'm here to talk about women, and I can't wait to hear what kind of questions you have for me.
Awesome. Well, maybe I'll start it off here then, and then just talk about what women in sports leadership means to you as someone who's been in the industry for over 30 years and has seen it come a very long way.
Well, unfortunately, not far enough, right? As women in every industry have experienced in women's basketball, we're about 60-40 men coaching as opposed to women. I think if you look overall, Division I, in every sport, women are only 8% of the coaches. And that's because, of course, they don't really like women coaching men. However, we're very open to having men in our game coaching women. So I think there's a lot of strides that we need to make. I think we need to just do a lot more in the hiring process. And I think it comes down to the athletic directors. When you look at the athletic directors across the country, it's only 11% are women. And it's just a handful in the Power Five. So in schools that have big time football, there's probably 4 or 5 women ADs. So I think when that changes, when we see that, and we see that even on campus, when you look around at the faculty, how many, well, we're not going to have a female president. I think that's something we can all agree on, not for a while, but faculty, and women on campus. I was so excited to have a female provost. I mean, I think that's such a huge step for Notre Dame. After 250 years of white men, we finally get a woman. So I think we are making some small strides. Next, maybe we'll even get in the fight song. Maybe they'll include the daughters in that song. But we still have so many things that we can improve on campus.
No, I completely agree. I think we're all very familiar with that in the business college, especially because I think there's a lot of progress that's been made, but a lot of progress to be made as well. Can I ask you what your top 3 most important leadership qualities of any great female leader or any great leader in general would be?
Well, I'm teaching a sports leadership class in Mendoza, and I'm really, really enjoying it. And, I looked at a lot of different people. I was doing a lot of homework this summer trying to figure out what is it about leadership? What are the characteristics? And I think that there are definitely traits of a leader. And I think honesty is probably number 1. You have to be inspiring. You have to be forward thinking. And I think those are important, but you have to be competent. And I think that is something that women are really good at. I think we're all very competent in our jobs. It's unfortunate that I think employers sort of value confidence more than competence. And I think that's why a lot of women don't get into leadership positions. But for me, when I look at leadership, I think it's somebody that has a vision, and has a plan on how we're going to get there. I think that's really important. You also have to role model what you want people to act like, how you want them to be, what the culture of your team is going to be. And I think having that culture of belonging, that culture where everybody feels like they're in a safe environment, and there's somewhere where their voice is going to be heard. And then I think for me, a commitment to excellence. I think those are the 5 things that I really try to stress in my leadership. But certainly those traits, that you want in a leader. Everybody wants somebody they can trust, and that's important. And I think honesty is something that this generation really could use a little more of. I think honest feedback is something that we're just not willing to give. And it bothers me when people would go for their end of the year interview and talk about things you have to work on. And I think people are reluctant to tell us what we need to work on. And I think that it's so important that we're really proactive when we ask for those kind of meetings and talk about what is it, how do you see me? What is my role here? When I had my team, I gave everybody a role. These are the 3 things I need from you. And I told the whole team in front of the rest of the players so that everybody knew not just what their role was, but what everyone else's is. And I think sometimes working on those weaknesses, it's so important. I'd say this is what your role is. If you don't like it, then let's fix it in the summer. That's when you're going to work on these things in order to get better. But I think women, we sit back sometimes and we say, well, nobody said I was doing anything wrong, so I guess I'm doing a great job. And we don't ask those questions. And I think that's so important to ask. Where do you see me? How do you see me? Do you know I want more? Do you know I want to get promoted? Do you know I want to get to this point? And think of me when jobs are opening. So I think that nobody's as interested in your career as you are. And so we really have to be more proactive.
No, thank you for that. I think that's great. We've got a couple questions in the chat coming in. The first one's from Molly Hinnicker, and I'll shout out to Molly that Molly is the individual who actually brought up Meals with Muffet to the Women in Business Leadership team.
Nice.
And she's really the one that spearheaded the entire food drive for us. So she did an awesome job. And her question is, what do you think it's going to take for more women to be hired in athletic director roles? And how long do you think that's going to take?
Well, Molly, first, thanks for your help with the food drive. And it's going to take a long time. I mean, football was probably the last bastion of chauvinism in the sports world. And that is one that is just really difficult for us. And I think that we have to get to that position in leadership where, and the women, they're called the SWA, the Senior Women's Administrator. And honestly, they are not treated as anywhere near equal. I don't think our voice is heard nearly enough. So I think that in the administration, you have to try to get to that place where you can do more so that you're not just overseeing the women's sports, that you're overseeing some of the men's sports, that you're on the financial side, you're looking at budgets. I think it's the business people, especially now. I think more athletic directors, they all used to be coaches, now they're business guys. So I think getting into the business part of it is important too. I think we probably are going to start at the level that doesn't have big time football, which we are at right now. I think you're seeing more women get hired when there isn't football. And I think from there, we can start to make more strides. But when you have mostly white men making these decisions, they're going to hire people that look like them. And it's really difficult, I think, for people of color and for women to break into that. We just got to keep knocking on the door. We have to be in that position where when we get somebody in that position, they're going to look and hire women. And it's unfortunate that I think a lot of times with women, we're kind of judged on our gender. Well, we tried a woman, didn't work. Let's go back to a man. When a man fails, it's because of that individual. So I think we just need to do a better job of supporting each other. But again, we have to be in a position where if you're in administration, you're knocking on the door of your athletic director saying, I want to be an AD. How do I get there? How can you help me get there? Because I think that's part of their job.
I think that's awesome. So we have another question here from Molly Lawrence. She asked if you could maybe explain your leadership style, especially managing and coaching a group of competitive female athletes. Women tend to be each other's biggest supporters and empower one another, yet we also all tend to compete the most with each other.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think women are very different than men. And of course, I've never coached men, so I can't exactly compare them. But I think that when you identify the roles, I think that's really important. I think self-awareness is something that is really lacking in people. And I think that it's really important for me to sit down and say, here's your strengths and weaknesses. Let's talk about them. What do you see as your strength? What do you see as your weakness? We never talked about scoring. we never went into any kind of team meeting and talk about winning or scoring. Obviously, winning was always the goal, but we never wanted to put either the pressure on somebody, or we never wanted anybody to kind of be somebody that's going to, stand out and get their name in the paper all the time. So we tried to spread it around. We talked about assists. That was our big thing. How many assists did you have? How many rebounds did you have? What did you do defensively? So I think for us, we had a system of basically, call it gold stars. And after a game, we would look and say, you played 20 minutes, you didn't have a turnover, you get a gold star. You were perfect from the free throw line, you get a gold star. Your field goal percentage or your defense or your rebounding or something was really good. So I think it's kind of like there's an old saying, what you allow is what will continue. And also what you praise and what you really talk about, that is what people are going to say, this is our culture. And we had a culture of unselfishness. I think that was so important. So Enrique would have, 30 points and we'd be like, yeah, that's great. But, what did everybody else do? So I think making everyone feel important is so, so critical to your success, from the last player on your team who doesn't play as much, doesn't get that notoriety. You have to make them feel like, well, if you didn't do what you did at practice, Enrique never would have been able to do that. If you didn't do such a good job on the scout team, we wouldn't have won that game. And we give them a chance to get those gold stars also, by things that they do, whether it's community service or in the classroom. Everybody's included, and we do everything as a team. We win as a team, we lose as a team. So we never set them apart and said, well, Enrique's special, she's not going to have to do these kind of things that everybody else has to do. And, I yelled at her just as much as I yelled at everyone else. So there was definitely some equality there.
And can I ask a follow-up question on
Yeah.
how you saw, individuals like Enrique or Skylar Diggins becoming that leader, and also, empowering their teammates who maybe aren't playing as much as them?
It's so important for us as leaders to empower our future generation and get them to use their voice. And one of the things that I like to do a lot is I ask a lot of questions. I think that nobody likes to be criticized. And so I would always give them the option of critiquing themselves. We'd watch film and I'd say, well, what could you have done there? What else do you see now that you're watching it? What are some other ideas that you could have? And allow them to, to talk about things. But the competitive part, everybody's competitive. And especially the players I had, all probably the best player in their state. I had a number of All-Americans. And so how they're going to compete, and everybody wants to be great, and everybody's not going to get a chance at the end of the game to be the hero. And so they have to know, value, and appreciate their role and get that recognition that everybody craves. And so I think if you can do a good job of that, of managing how everybody is being recognized, I think that's a really important point also. But leadership, I think, is something that you kind of grow into it. And I think there's certain people that you hope will be leaders, but everybody's not that person. And so I don't think that you can really make someone the leader. And I've had introvert leaders, I've had just the facts, no emotion leaders, I've had crazy, just spontaneous fun and really extroverted leaders, and they've all been successful in their own way. And I think that's the important thing, is that you allow them to be themselves and to be the leader that they can be.
Awesome. So we're going to shift here a little bit, and Elena Westbrook has another question for you. Can you talk about a time when you've had your worldview or beliefs challenged and grew from it?
I don't know about my views so much as my leadership went. I went 180 on my leadership when I started coaching, which was a long time ago. And in fact, coming to Notre Dame, Bobby Knight was at Indiana, and he was this great coach. He was the Olympic coach, and he was like a my way or the highway kind of guy. And that's how coaches were back then. So I would go to practice and I would say, this is what we're doing. Here's how we're doing it. Here's where we're going. Get on board. And I never asked them what they thought, ever. And I bet I went almost 20 years, kind of with that sort of philosophy. And then in around 2000 or, late 90s, I started to talk to the team more. And, it was more about the relationship, which is a big part of leadership, that empathy and the relationship that you have with the players. And suddenly, I changed, and it was kind of a gradual thing, but it was also a case of looking in the mirror and going, you know what, this is not what that team needs. This is a team, and it was a veteran team, so I could ask their opinion a little bit more, but it was definitely a conscious decision of me to move from this, I'm the dictator, I'm the authoritarian, to a little more of a, I don't know if it was completely democratic, but it was definitely affiliative, definitely more about, how they felt about things. And it was such a positive change, not just for our success, but for me, I loved it more. I mean, I was just so much more in tune with what the players were thinking. We saw each other off the court a lot more than we used to. And, the coach player relationship used to be very different. I think now they're, as they graduate, especially, and they come back, we turn into friends, which I couldn't have imagined, I think, at some point in my career. So that leadership change was huge. But I also think failure, you learn a lot from failure. Oh, I have learned so many more things from failing, and the team has too. I think you learn so much more when you lose. Because you have to really take a hard look at things, and you look and you say, where did I go wrong? What happened? And, accountability is one of our core values. And so we never let them blame the referees or blame anything, but looking in the mirror and looking at themselves. And so we took a hard look at ourselves as a staff. What did we do wrong? Did we prepare wrong? Or was the scouting just bad ideas? What did we do in the game, or was it just the execution of it? So I think having to look at yourself and fail. I think women especially, we don't handle failure that well. We take it personally, just like we take criticism personally. If something goes wrong and we get criticized for it, we kind of get a little defensive and we get a little sensitive, and we're not exactly excited about taking that next risk. And I think that's where we need to be more like men. When men don't get a job, or something goes wrong, they're like, well, it certainly wasn't my fault, right? I mean, it was because they had somebody in mind, or they were doing this or that. And for women, we just take it so personally, like, wow, I wasn't good enough. I didn't check all the right boxes. And then conversely, when we're praised and people are saying, great job, what's the first thing we say? Well, my team, boy, my team really did a great job. Boy, my staff, I couldn't have done it without my staff. I was so blessed to have the opportunity. I was in the right place at the right time. We just kind of go the opposite way. And when you tell a man, you did a great job, he says, thank you. And he accepts that he did a great job. But we are so reluctant to accept that because we're such team players, which is why it's so hard for us in business, because we're walking that tightrope of, hey, you got to promote yourself. You got to be confident. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. Let's not get overconfident. Let's not be arrogant. You're supposed to be humble. You're supposed to be a team player. Stand up and use your voice, but not too loudly. You gotta know exactly the tone that you're going to use. And I mean, it's exhausting to try to walk that line of what we are trying to do. And, we don't want to be like men. We lead in a completely different way. But there's a lot of problems with that. And so we need that assertiveness. And that's why, you look at the political area and you look at when all those women were running for president, the way they were treated, the adjectives used to describe them, so different, than men. We're talking about likability and electability. And I'm like, what about capability? We are just as capable. So, we have so many stereotypes to fight. I don't even know where to begin.
I think everyone in the room saying amen. I'm seeing lots of head shakes. Awesome. So Lauren Maida has a question for you on kind of along the same thought process on how did you tailor your coaching strategies, particularly to female athletes, to counteract some of these things?
I think the first thing was to just let them know that they look at women differently. Honestly, men coaching women can say some really, really interesting things and women, we just take it because, well, that's a guy. They don't ever think poorly of them because they expect them to be kind of a knucklehead sometimes, and well, it's just guys, they're like that. But when a woman does something like, and if I would get upset and I would, be yelling at somebody, I think underlying thoughts, sometimes they'd be like, gosh, maybe she doesn't like me, and it turned completely from the coaching part. So one of the things I tried to do is make everything was statistics and facts. Like, here you are on film doing this. This is not me judging. This is not me being subjective. This is you doing this in the wrong way. So I think it was really important for me to make sure it was never like about your effort or, you're not working hard enough, because you can't judge those things, so it had to be something that I could really judge them. But women are competitive, and that was hard. And I used to tell them, you know what? Conflict is good. Nobody likes conflict. Nobody. Conflict can be good. And on a championship team with that kind of culture, you have to be able to engage in a little bit of conflict. Because when women all get together, we got 12, 15 women, there's going to be conflict. There might be a little bit of drama, or there might be something. And so you have to know how to handle that. And you have to be in an environment where you feel safe enough to be honest with each other, and not just to say something, but to receive it at the same time. So it kind of works both ways. But I think, I taught my girls, like, hey, we need to compete. You know what? We may not be the first one trash talking, but somebody talks to you, you better respond. I want you to have a swagger. When you make a shot, yeah, you better feel good about that. And so I guess I promoted that when Skylar came. She was the first one to have that swagger. And I was always like, dang, girl, calm down. And then you watch men and you go, well, nobody's telling them to calm down. So why am I doing that? So, I changed because she changed me. And then, with Enrique, same thing. So that can be contagious. And that's what we need. We need more women with a swagger.
I think that's pretty cool. I know I follow Skylar Diggins and Enrique on Instagram and all that, and their presence on Instagram is very different from a lot of other female athletes, but it's pretty cool. They're the ones who are talking directly to the NBA players and, having conversations and some back and forth. Pretty cool. So Sarah Hohenberger has a question about the future of women's pro sports, the WNBA women's soccer team. Two arguments are there. Equal pay for equal play, and the other is revenue-based, bottom line, that men's sports make more money overall. So what's your opinion on what's the solution, or what's the future of women's pro sports?
Well, when you look at women's soccer, they made more money. Their jerseys sold better. All of their equipment, anything that people were buying, the women's team outsold the men's team. They were more successful, way more successful. It wasn't even close. What they were making. And in fact, one of the projects in my class, that one of the teams talked about the amazing disparity between the two, how the men would make X number of dollars and the women were so underpaid. So in that situation, I really believe equal pay. I mean, I think that there was no more, the fans attended, just as the same amount, everything. And actually the women really should be paid more because they're more successful. And that's what I would have gone for. But they went to court and they didn't win. So I think that's a battle they're still fighting. The WNBA and the NBA, I don't think you can compare those two. The W does not make the money. They don't have the fan support. They're not really in a position. And they don't want equal pay. That's not what they're ever fighting for. They want better pay. And, I remember when Ruth Riley graduated in 2001, she was the number 5 pick in the draft. Troy Murphy was on the men's side. He came out, he was, I don't know, he was a top 10 pick. He made like $4 million and Ruth made like 40,000. The disparity in salaries is crazy. And I think Kathy Engelbert, the new president and commissioner of the WNBA, is trying to change all that. But we have a long way to go with that. You even look at women's golf. I've been to some LPGA events. They're not very well attended. I don't know what it's going to take. I think it's got to start, younger, starting at high school, even go to high school games. The boys basketball, it's packed, the girls basketball, not so much. So, I think we have a lot of work to do to get to equality.
So along that same line, it's been commented on before, but what do you see as the difference between NCAA women's basketball that gets quite a bit of notoriety? People are winning ESPY awards. You can watch all of the NCAA tournament on ESPN, and then these athletes go on to their professional careers and actually lose steam in the media and viewership. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
It's amazing. We treat them better too. When they're at Notre Dame, we're chartering flights to go to games. We feed them a lot. We give them a lot of stuff. We really take really good care of them. And then they go to the pros, they're flying commercial. They're traveling, they're playing the day of the game. Everything is just not as good. And for the money they're making, especially. And I think that's changing under Kathy Engelbert also. I think that changed. But you see the NCAA tournament, the women's Final Four has sold out for 25 years at least. We do well in the Final Four. We're not doing so well in the regionals. That's an area where we don't get the same attendance. But if you look on your TV, okay, and if you have Comcast and you go to sports on the guide and you page through, it's going to say, women, college basketball and all that. There's no tab for the WNBA on there. There is no such thing as a WNBA according to Comcast. When you look for the men's and women's basketball tournaments, you see NCAA tournament. That means men. On the women, it says women's NCAA tournament. So it really, in my opinion, should say men's NCAA tournament and women's, but of course, men's basketball is the cash cow for the NCAA. So that is, that's their baby. And that's something that, is always going to be that way. But in the long run, I mean, I think we're doing much better attendance wise. We're doing a lot. We're getting a little more notoriety. We're getting a lot of TV now that all of the conferences, except for I think the Big 12, have their own TV. So you're going to see a lot more women's games on television. And I think things are really improving in terms of the NCAA.
Awesome. We've got another question here from Molly Hineker. At the Final Four a couple of years ago, you had a fantastic press conference that drew a lot of national attention. You obviously use your platform to promote women. How do you encourage both your fellow male and female colleagues to do the same?
It's easy to get the women on board. We're all fighting for the same thing. The harder part is getting the men on board. And especially when I'm out there saying, hire more women, there's a lot of male coaches that aren't really jumping on board with that kind of statement. And so what I try to tell them is, as a male head coach, hire female assistants. You want to get women that you can mentor and promote and get out there working a little bit better. But we need men. We need men to advocate for us. We need men because they're they're 90% of the ADs. So we need them to see women and in a kind of a different way. And I feel like that's part of my job, to really encourage them to see that. So when a job is open, I might go into the AD and say, I hope we're going to look at some women candidates for this job. What about the females for this particular job? And so trying to get them on our side. And we're fortunate that we have that in our athletic department right now. But everybody doesn't. And I think that there are some ADs out there who have only hired women to coach women. And there's some that really don't even think about it. So I think probably when I gave my speech at the Final Four, it was interesting that some people were, they were like, what is she talking about? They didn't have any idea, which is probably worse than the people that are just opposed to it, because the thing about sexism and gender bias, mostly they don't even know they're doing it, which is probably my biggest frustration. I would almost rather they said, you know what, I'm just not hiring women than to say I don't understand, why you'd be upset about that. So we have so many battles to fight, but I think the stereotypes, that's got to be the biggest one.
Awesome. I know the rest of us all loved seeing that press conference and watching it go viral. Pretty cool. We've got another question here kind of along the same lines from Madeline McEvely. Was there a pivotal mentor that helped evolve the leader and coach you are today?
I had some mentors when I started. Jim Foster, I worked with him, for him at St. Joe's when I first started. He was a great mentor in terms of the coaching part of things. But really, when you look at for women, it was hard to find a woman. There were so few of us that were really speaking up. And then Pat Summitt was probably the one. She was phenomenal for the women's game. She was somebody that everybody looked to whenever anything happened. They'd go, what would Pat do? Let's all look and see. And she cared about the women's game, not just about what was happening at Tennessee. And I had a lot of respect for her. So I kind of watched her from afar. And then just people like RBG, Billie Jean King, you read those stories, you watch those movies, and you just think, gosh, I'm not doing anything. I need to do more. I mean, look what these women are doing. So how can I help? And then when Pat passed away, I felt like there was a big void, in our game. And, I kind of wanted to be somebody that would look to step into that spot. So it really was just recently that I think like most women, how you think, well, when I'm successful, when we start winning, when I do this, when I've earned the right, I'm going to speak up more. And that is so wrong. I looked at my team and I said, what am I doing? Why am I waiting? I mean, I need to speak up now. So I think that's an important thing for women. I think we always feel like we have to earn it. And men do not feel that way.
No, thank you. So another question I have is we've a lot of women in this MBA program are former athletes, former college athletes, current club sport athletes here at Notre Dame. Do you have any advice on how we can use some of those leadership skills built through sport and use it in the business world after graduation as we all look to get our MBA degrees here in the next year or two?
Well, there's a huge carryover. I think somebody did a study on female CEOs, and I think it was like, I don't know, 80% of them played a college sport. And I think that it's so important because all the things you learn, the discipline, the work ethic, teamwork, unselfishness, sacrifice, and confidence. I think that sports really can help build your confidence. And so I think those things, because probably the one thing that we all need a little more of is confidence. And I think that believing in ourselves, I think is something that we need to do. And I wish we would treat ourselves like we treat our friends when they're about to apply for a job and we tell them how great they're going to be and they're the perfect candidate and all these things. And then when it's our turn, we kind of go, oh, well, I'm not so sure. I think that is important. But I think just finding your voice and using your voice. I think not being afraid. When the Black Lives Matter moment happened in the summer, so many people didn't know what to say. And so they didn't say anything. And I think it's like those are the moments when leaders step up and you can't worry about, well, what is everybody going to say? Because women, we worry way too much about what other people think and what other people are going to say about us. And so you have to be able to just say it. And like Eleanor Roosevelt said, do what you think is best because you're going to be criticized either way. So you might as well at least do what you think was best. But those kind of moments, people are looking when there's a void in leadership and nobody's talking. They're looking for somebody to step up, and that's our moment.
Awesome. We have another question here in the chat, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce your name, so please come off mute and correct me here. But can you share about how you balance between your professional life and your family life?
That's a question that's unfortunate that men never have to answer. And that is another kind of stereotype that really bothers me when they talk about women and, who's going to watch the kids if you're working and what about this and that? And how does your husband feel if you make more money than him, which, is just so ridiculous, when you think about it. But I loved this. I had just one son and he would come to practice and I loved that he got to see a woman leading. I love that he got to see a man working for me. I love that he got to see all these competitive, strong women who could be kind of role models for him down the road. But there were a lot of times when I couldn't make it to his game, his soccer game or his basketball game or whatever, because I was out recruiting or we had, something that I couldn't make it. And I thought it was great that he learned early on, you know what? The sun really doesn't rise and set just on you. You are not the center of everybody's universe. And that was a really good lesson to learn, especially this generation who really believes that they're all special. And so, he was certainly special, but not, I think he learned quickly, I can't always be there and that's going to be okay. And, all the things that he learned through that. And now he's in the IT field. He's had 2 female bosses, which is for him, he's like, what's the big deal? Like, women lead, like that's no big deal. But other people on his team are like, dang, how about this? We got a woman leading, So I think that all the things he learned from that, I think was great. And the stereotypes, my husband and I are complete reversal because I was always so busy. He was cooking and he was doing the laundry and, he was doing all these things. And so my son, he can cook, he can do laundry, he can do all those things that everybody thought, was the woman's job. So I really, looking back, it was hard. I felt a lot of guilt as we all do. And, I tried to give one day, like Sunday, that's your day. We'll do whatever you want. And, you're away and you're missing things. And, you just have to know that eventually, they're going to learn a really valuable lesson.
Awesome. Thank you. So another question here from April. We're all surrounded by people with a different level of understanding and acceptance of gender inequality and other inequalities as well. Do you have any recommendations on how to show the men in our lives the disparity so that they believe and understand it?
Well, I like stats. I'm very big on stats and I also, I like to watch things and see. And when I saw AOC on the floor of the House, going after the guy that didn't really apologize for calling her a bitch on, that was a big moment, I thought, for women. I showed it to my class when she stood up and said, this is not, we're not going to take this anymore. Kind of like the time's up, Me Too, like all those things are basically women standing up and saying, we're not going to take this anymore. So, I think it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to say, well, we haven't even passed the ERA. Like, how can people be opposed to equality for women? So, I have a ton of stats of, there's this many CEOs and there's this many people in this business. And so I think it's important to point those out, but when it happens, and I think for men, their magic moment is when they have a daughter. Unfortunately, it takes them going out and seeing, wait a minute, this isn't the same way that my son is treated. Why is my daughter being treated differently? But I tell you, I think it starts at pink and blue. It starts when you're in the store and you want to get a toy for the girls, and you got to go over here and look at all the dolls and everything in pink. And then, you look at what the boys are being offered, and we got to fix that, and I think when that changes, I think eventually everything else will change.
Awesome. So we have another question here from Madeline McEvely. When you talk about different coaching styles of men versus women coaches, Gino Ariema comes to mind. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship and rivalry with him over the years, and maybe also when recruiting players? And then if I can add another question to kind of add on that, to say, when you do have a rival at work or someone you disagree with, how do you, work through that and still maintain the respect of your team?
Well, we're being recorded, so I'll try to be political here.
It's a loaded question. It's a loaded question. Sorry.
The best rivalry in women's college basketball was Notre Dame UConn, and I think that I can really get under his skin, and I love that. I love that I could be in his head, and just knowing that. So I think the important thing for me in that rivalry really was that I had to let him know that I wasn't backing down. No matter what he said, I'm not afraid of you. I respect what you've done. And, that is for sure. But I am not going to just bow down and say, oh, well, you're the best. So, I mean, we battled, and I brought that to my team, and I would be in the locker room saying, hey, don't you worry about what Gino's saying. I'll take care of Gino. You know what? You take care of what happens on the court. And so I think showing them that, just the way that we would interact in the media was very difficult for me, because he could say whatever he wanted and I couldn't, and because I would be judged completely differently. And I had some people tell me, my gosh, I was telling my team how you're such a great leader because you're so humble. And then you went on ESPN and said, like, bring it on, Gino, or something like that. And, they were shocked that a woman could say that. But I thought it was important, because I think he could be a bit of a bully. And I think it was important to stand up to him. And if I didn't do that, what would my team do? So I think that I really was able to get that through. And I'm not sure if I got the other part of the question.
Working through a rivalry like that, how can you work through that kind of rivalry in the business world too, when you do come across someone that you don't see eye to eye with?
Yeah, I think the important thing is open communication. And I think, you can agree to disagree, but you have to talk about it. And I think so many times we get passive aggressive. We don't talk about it, and we just are like we don't even hear anymore. We're not listening anymore. And sometimes, you got to give in a little bit. And so you have to try to come to a win-win. Say, what am I willing to give up? If you meet me halfway, what would that look like? I know we look at things differently, but you know what? It's good to have different points of views. I never want to be surrounded with people that agree with me all the time. You need that. And you need people that are going to say, I'll tell you why that's not going to work, because it's better to do that in the room than to go out and put in a plan and then have it totally fizzle in public. So, I think that's important, but I think you have to, sometimes we look at other people all the time. We're always comparing ourselves, oh gosh, well, he's getting all the attention because he's doing that. And I'm not, everybody wants to feel important. But I just think it's important that you look at what you value and you know what you stand for. And these are, my core values. I'm not going to sway from those. But there are times when I'm going to have to give a little bit and try to get what I want for what's best for the team. That's the thing. It's like, what's best for the organization? What's best for the team?
Thank you. And Grace Conroy is going to hop off mute here and ask her question.
Yeah. Hi, Coach. Thanks for your time today. I'm a big fan of yours, and my mom was actually a camper back at the Kathy Rush basketball camp when you were a counselor there. So we've admired you for a long time. But my question is is there anyone in, coaching in sports, women in sports right now, or even in the business world that you're kind of keeping an eye on or admiring that we might not be, I guess, in the mainstream yet?
Well, certainly Neil Ivy. I think I am so excited about her. Excited that we have our first African-American female coach. Excited for the future, for what she's done coming off that NBA season. I think the NBA is doing a fabulous job of hiring women. Those 9 women assistant coaches in the NBA, and I think they're trying to really help women. They're hiring female referees. So, I look at her. It's really hard because we just don't get the attention. When you look on the men's side and you say, who are the top coaches? People rattle off like 10 different names. But on the women's side, now that Pat's gone, they hardly know them. Certainly Dawn Staley, at South Carolina is one who's doing a lot of great things. Tara Vanderveer at Stanford, but Tara's a little less outspoken, so she doesn't really get out into the public mainstream as much. But there's just so few of us, and I think that until we get to that time where they're standing up and speaking, and they're trying to, but their platform's not as big. So we need them to be the ones that are, getting to the Final Four and getting that kind of attention, which Dawn certainly has done. And, I think she came out this year and said, I'd be interested in the 76ers coaching job. And everybody went, what? Like not unusual for a man to say that, but, she's got a pretty good resume too. So I think she's one of the young and upcoming, future Olympic coach for us. So I think she'll be really special. But I think it's more the players on the women's side. I think you look at the women's soccer, it's the players. I honestly could not remember the coach's name right now. So it's the players. Same in the WNBA. It's all about the players.
Awesome. Thank you. So maybe one final question here before we move into what I would like to do, the quick fire questions. So you mentioned it a little bit, but what is it like to be a leader who's constantly televised, critiqued, analyzed, and your decisions both on the court and off the court? Hopefully these other women in here in 10, 15 years are holding their press conferences as CEOs and can learn from it.
Well, I'll tell you the most important thing I do. Every year, I gather my team in a circle and I say, the only people whose opinion I respect are you. This is it. This is my circle. I don't care what anybody else says. I think it was Brene Brown that said, if you're not doing what I'm doing at the level that I'm doing at it, I don't have any interest in your opinion. So I'm on Twitter, but I never look at the notifications. I've turned them off. I don't need to see the bad things that people are saying about me. And it's kind of funny because I'm oblivious, which is good and bad, but people are saying like, oh my God, like, how about when you did that? And I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about because I'm not on Twitter. So I don't know what people are saying. And I don't have any respect for somebody that doesn't even use their real name to come out and say something who's, never coached and probably never even played the game. So I think I ignore most of it. I think that if there's something that I find constructive, like my boss is certainly somebody I would listen to, but there's some people that I would listen to, and then the others I just let it go and just say, I don't really care what your opinion is, and so I think that that's important because we get bogged down with that. I mean, we listen to all those voices, and they're always negative. So you're just constantly being consumed by all the negativity. And, it's no wonder that we start to get a little defensive or sensitive about it. So I find it better to just kind of full forward and not really worry about what people are saying about me.
Awesome. All right. So if we can end here with something kind of fun, we'll do a couple quick fire questions. If you can just answer first thing that comes to mind, 1 or 2 quick answers.
Okay.
All right. Favorite pregame snack?
I never eat pregame. I'm nauseous.
Okay. Favorite way to celebrate a win?
Oh, I have a support group of friends after games that we always huddle at one person's house and have a great time.
Fun. Who is your hero?
RBG, for sure.
Favorite part about Notre Dame?
I love that it's a place where integrity matters.
Favorite win looking back?
Pretty much any win over Connecticut and then the championship game, 2018.
Awesome. Who do you call when you need advice?
I think different people, depending on what kind of advice I'm looking for. My husband is a great resource for me. I mean, I can kind of lean on him for a lot of things, but I go to my boss, Jack Swarbrick. I think he's terrific. He's got great vision and he really knows a lot and he can be really objective, but it's important that you have somebody you go to that will tell you the truth.
Awesome. Most memorable game? Maybe it's not one of the wins.
Yeah, again, let's go back to Connecticut. I think beating them at the buzzer was definitely one of the ones I watched the most.
Awesome. We all saw it on the highlight reel about that 700 times too, which is always fun. And then last question, favorite thing about teaching business students now in your new role?
I love teaching. I'm really enjoying it. I think that my class would probably think it was called Women in Leadership because we've spent a lot of time on that, and all my guest speakers have been women. So I think the great part is really just staying involved with the students. You know, I got half grad students, half undergrads, and I just love hearing their perspective on things.
Awesome. Well, we'll end it right there and make sure everybody can get to class, including yourself. But want to say a huge thank you, Coach, that not only has this been super fun over the last hour, but just so excited that you're a part of the Mendoza community here.
Thanks, Brown. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks. All right, you guys have fun
Bye.
in class. See ya. Thanks, Coach.
See ya.